Well, it's very hard to judge whether people will like this or not. I mean, she opens herself up to a lot of criticism because people will say variously, well, where do these recipes come from? We've seen them before. Or in some cases, they're saying, you should not put pasta on the top of the tomatoes and then put boiling water on the top. That would not be done in Italy. That's a disaster. We don't actually get any sort of clue at the end as to what the ingredients that you would need if you wanted to follow any of these recipes. So I guess following the recipes isn't really the point of the whole thing. And there are obviously times too when, there's a cut and suddenly, the cooking has advanced a little bit and something else has been put in off camera. It's a rich woman in a very expensive kitchen, which is not her own. And one of the reports said you'd have to spend 8 million to get a house with a kitchen like that in it. The various pots and pans and devices that you need have all been listed in the media and all very expensive. I see figures like £450 and £60 here and £50 there. So what is really going on? It's a sort of presentation of a kind of a rather false, but you know, potentially enviable life, I suppose, in Montecito. I mean, it's all very glamorous and doesn't seem to have very much to do with reality. These sort of documentaries about somebody like her in a kitchen are bound to be seen to be rather false and cringy because it's not really real life, is it? I mean, it's a sort of presentation. I don't know whether there's an element of escapism which we should enjoy in all this, that we can go along and think, well, that's how she lives. I wonder whether she really does live like that. Who knows? But they talk a little bit. You get an impression of what her life was like, and I guess that's really what it's all about in the end. It's more about her. It's more about. I mean, we people will watch it. I suppose even I will watch it in order to get more of an impression of what she's like. And I mean, she is a slick presenter. I mean, and you can't blame her for doing a little jig around the kitchen or making some sort of jokes and things like that, because otherwise it becomes incredibly boring. But it's this awful thing that which I've said so many times before. If you go into that celebrity world, you're always trying to do something to reinvent yourself. You're always trying to keep yourself relevant and keep yourself in front of the cameras and keep people watching. And therefore, you come up with all these different things and you can be criticized. People can say, well, you shouldn't cook like that, or you shouldn't be wearing that in the kitchen, or that's not your kitchen. And, none of us have got a garden. We don't have bees. We can't make honey. We can't do any of these things because we don't have the ingredients to hand. Whether she does or not, I don't know, but it implies that she does. So, and does she in fact spend her whole time cooking and doing all these things, or is this just for the benefit of the Netflix viewers? This is the other question. It's worth mentioning a rare sighting of her mother, who seemed to have rather disappeared off the radar for some time, but she was very much there in the last episode as well. It's just a totally different world. Somebody once said about Hollywood. You go out to Hollywood as a young person, you lie down on a banquette beside a swimming pool, and you wake up and you're 65. It's that sort of, the sun is always shining. There you are. You're stuck out there, and life just passes by. So you present yourself as a cookery expert, and you show viewers the way you do things. And other people say, actually, that's the worst you could do. You shouldn't do it like that at all. You're going to come up against the experts. You're going to come up against people who've been cooking pasta all their lives and who disapprove of this particular method. I found myself at one point thinking, don't try this at home, which is a sort of warning that sometimes people put on things, don't they? When somebody's doing some athletic jump or something, or don't try it at home. I mean, so what I think the cookery experts are saying is don't do it that way. And so therefore, to some extent, the show loses a bit of credibility. If you put yourself forward and you present, ideas and things, and you get it wrong, you will be criticized. And this is where where she's always going to be in trouble because, you know, she's not an expert at a lot of the things that she does. And there's a certain amount of hostility towards her, and therefore she invites this sort of criticism. You know, if you present things and it's wrong, you're going to be criticized. And I did think that, you know, if it was a really serious cookery program, perhaps at the end, you know, you might have had a list of the ingredients and the recipe, and so to teach you how to do it. I mean, or maybe refer you to some site. Maybe there is a way of finding a site which you can look and see how she does things so that you can do it yourself. But I didn't come across that. I don't know if I was wrong, but I didn't come across that at all. So in other words, that must make me think it isn't really about cooking. It's really about her. You know, that's the thing.
Well, my impression was that it was humorless and a little bit, to me, like an old-fashioned Disney movie, whereas Meghan was sort of flitting from one thing to another with her fairy wand, um, just sort of touching things. It didn't seem to have any depth to it.
No.
And I thought that if Meghan does have a sense of humor, which we are led to believe she does, she certainly did not show it. And I think it could have been really funny if some, you know, if she'd been maybe a different kind of personality. And also it was all too perfect. It would also have been really much realer if they'd perhaps shown the two of them washing up or tidying up after the mess of making the candles. They were making candles, which was very laborsome. She was preparing for a guest, very unattractive looking tray. I know it was all meant to be homespun, but it was too contrived. I think that's what I would say about the whole show. It was too contrived and it had no humor. I think it would have been great if it had been her and Harry in her own home with the kids running around and the normal chaos of a morning or even a lunchtime. It was, as I said before, it was far too perfect, contrived, and studied. It looked like they sort of done 100 takes to get this one absolutely perfect. I think the whole thing, well, certainly the whole thing felt like an advert to me. That's what I meant by it was unreal. And I think people that are really interested in cooking won't be interested in this show because it's not professional. It's got nothing appealing about it apart from the very pretty setting and Meghan looking very pretty, but in sort of wonderful, sort of clean white blouses, which was about the worst thing you could possibly cook in. After all, this is meant to be her departure from the royal family. It's not meant to be her using the royal family yet again to gain publicity. But the only reason that we watch Meghan anyway is because, you know, she's married to a member of the royal family, and I obviously, you know, she's not stupid. She knows that, so she needs to move away from that and, you know, become something in her own right, which is what she's trying to do. But I fear she will be shot down over this. Certainly, the few things that I've already read have shot her down and said, you know, she's neither cook nor actress nor member of the royal family. She just sort of falls between the great. I think it is overproduced. It's very pretty. It's like a fairy tale. That's why I imagine Meghan as this little fairy flitting from, you know, from chopping board to stove to garden to looking at the mountains. It's all just too perfect, and it's very unreal. I think that that if anyone watches it, they won't admit they've watched it, and I think the royal family and the people that work around them will keep their distance from this program because there's, you know, they have nothing to say about it. Meghan is no longer part of the family, except, but, you know, but through marriage, but she's not a working member of the royal family, and they won't really probably want to credit this with any kind of remark at all, because any remark that comes from one of the palaces is going to give it more publicity. I think they'll keep very quiet about it. I think they won't be watching it. I'd be very surprised if they watched it at all. They might they might watch a trailer, but I don't think they'll watch the program. I don't think they'll want to have anything to do with it. I mean, we've seen Kate in the kitchen, we've seen William in the kitchen, and they're funny and they're real. And William cracks jokes and he wears an apron and his sleeves are rolled up. This is just sort of fantasy land. I think, sadly for Meghan, we're always going to criticize everything she does and everything she tries to do. And we manage through criticism to make it all look probably much more ridiculous than it really is. But I think Meghan is intelligent enough to know that she's going to get shot down by a certain section of people, but she still has her followers. And basically, all she needs is to get a big following on this show and to get Netflix, to have the ratings. They want the ratings. So she might get the ratings because of the curiosity value, but I can't see her product selling through Netflix, which is what they want, because I don't really see what people are buying apart from some very expensive little fripperies. And I don't know that people want that anymore, not at this particular juncture of life. Netflix want to get the money they've invested in Harry and Meghan. They want to get some of that back. So they have worked very hard on this series, and that's why it probably looks very overproduced and beautiful, because they really, really need to get their money's worth. And I can't see a second series of Meghan does, because she doesn't have an appealing enough personality. She's not funny. Had Netflix and Meghan, well, Meghan is an associate producer here or an executive producer. If they'd sort of sat down and thought, look, we've got to make this show funny, because otherwise it's going to flop and be embarrassing. Well, they should have, got Harry in and got Meghan and Harry cooking in the kitchen and spilling things and putting too much salt in and correcting things that go wrong. Now that would have been interesting, but I think this is actually deeply dull. I still think that they made a mistake. Netflix should have persuaded Harry to be a much bigger part of this show and made it there for an amusement value rather than a sort of glossy look at me and my gold jewelry and my white clothes and my beautiful makeup. I think they've got it wrong. I think it could have really worked with a lot of humor in it and a few mistakes. It's all too perfect. No, well, I don't think Harry would have done 8 episodes, but he might have done 4. I'm sure that Meghan could have persuaded him to be part of it. And then, of course, it would still got criticised, but at least it would have been fun. I think people will watch it from curiosity value, and I suppose that will certainly get the ratings up. But of course, Meghan wants to be the number one, and she wants to be centre stage, and it's fair enough, it's her show. But I would be very surprised if it was a big success, but I think it will get quite good ratings. The Meghan has got a big fan base around the world. They may not be here in the UK particularly, but she has got a big fan base around the world, and the people are curious. People are curious to see what she's going to say and what she's like. I don't know that they'll watch all 8 episodes, but they'll probably dip in and out of it. Those people that are interested. I mean, it's very hard to tell. I think a big name like Netflix, they need huge ratings to make this show a success, because the show that Harry did, the polo show, was again, it was very beautifully produced and shot, but it wasn't appealing enough to make it a success. It was a very narrow market. And I think this is probably a wider market because it's got cooking and it's got Meghan, and people are fascinated by Meghan, even if they're not fascinated by her cooking. So it's a curiosity value, but I don't think it'll be a hit.